dialogue bring into your communities is so needed, this kind of healing rhetoric. There's a lot of folks that want to get behind something positive. So dialogue is about balancing inquiry. I love some of the questions you all started off with yesterday around how do I learn how to do this around our food system? How do I connect to other rural communities? How might I build up and sustain our coalition? So I want you to continue to really inquire while we're here together and also be open to some new things that you hadn't expected to happen. We like to, community initiatives, kind of define dialogue as not only the art of thinking together, but also there's a slogan in a church that we found several years ago. It says, come as you are, but don't leave as you've come. So when we're in dialogue, we are transformed by it, whether we're in a group like this or when we're back in home. So I hope that you are delighted and surprised. There's some things that you take away that you didn't expect to take away here, and that you're quite intentional about some of the things that you named yesterday. So that's our I guess just a question in terms of, I know Elaine went through the agenda yesterday, so I decided that may not be the best use of our time, and we're going to help provide some guardrails, but we're going to be mixing it up. There's a lot of different modes of learning. We're going to root ourselves in this whole notion of what it means to be part of a larger movement, and how do we spark and flame a movement in our own communities and regions. But I'll just pause for a minute. Any questions or thoughts about kind of the agenda or ways that we can make sure that we're maximizing our time together? Is the agenda and why we're here clear enough to everyone? I heard yesterday somebody said, I really like this idea of connecting with other rural communities, and there's going to be opportunities for that to happen, I think, in some of the plenaries, particularly the breakouts when you're in your respective category A group. So I'm going to ask you to be really proactive on that front. So we're going to talk about movements this morning. I'm just curious real quickly, this term movement's thrown out all the time these days, yeah? So when you hear the movement, what kind of comes to mind? What's the words? Change? Shared vision? Cooperative efforts? Social justice? Mobilization? All appropriate definitions. Well, I'll be curious as you're thinking about this larger vision piece, and also start thinking about starting smaller visions. This morning I have the privilege of introducing a longtime colleague and friend, Monica Hobbs Vinluan, who will get up here in a moment. And Monica is the Senior Program Officer for Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. She's been there since 2015. She's doing very wide-ranging work around child health and well-being, including healthy weight. And before that, Monica was directing the Healthy Communities work at the YMCA of the USA. So a lot of those pieces that you saw earlier on yesterday around pioneering healthier communities and Achieve and CPBW, Monica was really the catalyst and led much of that for the YMCA of the USA, including a lot of the local and statewide work that was funded by RWJ. And so I can't think of a better person to kind of help us think about movements and somebody who was quite visible in this movement and in some ways really working behind the scenes. You can read again about Monica's bio. She's a really effective person on the Hill as a professional advocate for many years, worked for a senator. Probably the most important thing that Monica would want me to tell you is that she's a Hokie. She went and got her law degree, but she's defined by Hokie and Hokie football, and if you get her started, she won't stop. A huge New York Yankees fan, but we're really happy to have Monica kick us off and think a little bit about what does it mean to be part of this larger movement. So please join me in welcoming Monica Hobbs Vinluan.
Good morning. How are you all doing? Does everyone have their Starbucks this morning? Excellent. So some of you in the room might be wondering, what's a Hokie? And if you pay attention, I will tell you at the very end, okay, what it is. So it's so wonderful to be with you all this morning. I love these types of meetings. As Monty said, I've spent about a dozen years of my life working on multi-sectoral collaborations to try to engage and develop policy systems and environmental change. And a lot of times I speak in language like that, and most people have no idea what I'm talking about, but you all do. So it's just really exciting to be here because we all speak the same language. And I would have to say, with gratitude and appreciation, that so much of my time on creating these multi-sectoral collaborations to create PSC changes has really been with the CDC, and it was really with the CDC's leadership and development that we were able to actually engage almost 250 communities across the country in this work. So just thrilled and excited. Are my folks from Loudoun County here this morning? Hey! So another fun fact of Loudoun County, I'm from Loudoun County, and not only is it the Sonoma Valley of Washington, D.C., but there's actually 52 vineyards in Loudoun County, so you gotta start naming the number. 52 is a big number. I have my own personal top 5 list. If anyone wants to hear about those, we can talk later. 12 breweries, and distilleries are becoming all like hipster now too, so I gotta check those out with my skinny jeans, but haven't done that yet. So I'm just happy that Loudoun County's here. I know there's another Loudoun County person back there in the back, so we're all around. Loudoun County is a suburb of Washington, D.C., for those of you who don't know. I'm also thrilled to be in New Orleans. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has done a lot of historical investment in New Orleans. I was so inspired by Councilmember Cantrell. She was amazing, wasn't she? She was, you couldn't be but fired up after listening to her and wanting to run out. But then as I walked around Bourbon Street last night, smelling the smoke, I'm like, we haven't got everywhere, all public places, so we need to work on that. But just a couple weeks ago, Humana health insurance company and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation actually just announced a very large initiative here focused in New Orleans to really pledge to work together to identify barriers to health and to come up with ways to remove those obstacles. And actually the CEO of Humana and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation co-authored a column in the Times-Picayune newspaper, and I'm going to quote from it for a minute because it helps context setting for what I'm going to talk about. For too long, the system has been focused on treating symptoms. The best way to reduce health care costs, however, is to focus more on addressing the underlying causes of illness and chronic conditions and identify solutions to help people lead their healthiest lives possible. So that's what the work that the foundation is doing here in New Orleans, and that we're excited to start this effort with Humana Health Insurance. Let's see if I remove this. So when I was talking to Monty about this conversation and this dialogue this morning, he really asked me to try and think about movement building and place-based efforts across this country and help you all see the very important role that you play in those movements and those efforts. So I thought, of course, there was lots of maps yesterday. I took a map off a CDC website. This is a map of the National Implementation and Dissemination for Chronic Disease Prevention. But the reason why I'm putting up this map is really just asking and having you think for yourself about what are you all going to learn from each other? What skills and assets and attributions do you all have that you can borrow and understand from each other? I'm wondering how you all plan to celebrate successes with each other and how you learn from obstacles and failures together. And also really trying to think about how you strategize together. I think that's really part of the fundamental goals of this workshop, in essence, is to try to figure out how you all connect together and how you move this work forward. And if you're not doing those things yet, or if you haven't yet figured out a plan on how to do those, I encourage you before you leave to actually think about what steps you're going to take, that you personally are going to take to help connect these dots across this initiative. And there's lots of dots. One version of my slide deck, I actually had about 20 different maps, and I was like, that's enough maps. I'm not going to show any more maps. But I could show you maps of PITCH, of Pioneering Healthy Communities, of CPBW, of CTG, of REACH, Achieve. It's an alphabet soup, as Dr. Duckworth described yesterday. But again, vital to this movement. There's lots of dots that have been placed on this map, on these maps across the country. And importantly, there are lots of advocates and people in these communities that we can all learn from and really value and appreciate where their efforts have come. Of course, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation also has its slides, its maps, its dots. We have county health rankings and roadmaps, our active living by design sites, Communities Collaborating for Health Equity, also known as CCHE, and Voices for Healthy Kids. There's lots of others. So again, there's lots of place-based efforts and initiatives that have been going on really for the last 20, 25 years in this country. And the challenge is to be thinking about, again, how can we avoid duplication? And I should action required for Marriott guests. Thank you. We want to make sure we're connected. That was a subliminal message to make sure we're connected. And of course, I haven't been personally to some of your communities. I've actually have been to some of your communities, but I haven't been to all of them. But I know one thing from all my work and doing community and place-based work that I can assure you, and as I'm sure you would agree with me, there are advocates in your community that have been doing this work for a really long time. Sometimes they are not connected to the larger movement, or and maybe they're not connected to you and the efforts that you're doing. And maybe they've been doing work on specific strategies and solutions that maybe hasn't risen to the surface or hasn't raised to the top of your agenda or your strategies. But the point being that these are advocates that if you tap into their passion and their desire to make change and to improve the lives of others, they're more likely going to help you in your specific strategies and steps moving forward. These are folks that are working in all kinds of different kinds of coalitions. They are showing up at board meetings. They're sometimes the moms that are pretty ticked off about something that happened in schools. They are the ones that are voting, hopefully in 5 states today. They are the ones complaining. They are the ones encouraging. They're the ones rallying the troops and trying to make things happen. Those are the folks that you need to find in your community if you're not already connected to them, and really listen to what they have to say and why it is they're saying what they're saying. That's the essence. So whether it's a heart walk, a WIC enrollment campaign, a comprehensive planning meeting, or a flu outbreak, there's something going on in your community that's getting people fired up about something in some way. So your goal, and I would challenge you all to be thinking about how you can connect with those folks and tap into that passion, that advocacy, and that know-how. At the end of the day, these are all folks, just as you are, people who care about your communities and want to make things better. Some of you might have even been connected, some of your communities might have even been connected into past funding efforts as well. So what can you learn from past community assessments they've already done, past action planning they've already completed, past coalitions they've already built, past agendas they've already designed? How can you really try to beg, borrow, and steal from those things? Steal with permission. But how can you really leverage what's already been done? This work is too important, and there's too many things on your plate to try and reinvent the wheel and try to recreate and redesign these efforts. It really is, again, about connecting the dots. I assure you that there are dots in your communities. You just need to listen to them and understand where their passion is. I also challenge you to think about your neighboring communities or communities that are very similar to you. I've found a lot of times that folks will learn more from communities that are of the same size, the same geographic location, and sometimes have the same obstacles and challenges, and sometimes are identifying the same solutions. They've also developed a lot of those resources, they've developed a lot of those paths, and I've often said that we have to learn more from our skinned knees than we do from actually our accomplishments. So talk to them about how they skinned their knees, what they learned from it, and what you can do to really catalyze your work moving forward. So I really encourage you to think about what you can learn from our collective past and your community's past work. So what is a culture of health? I'm here at the foundation, from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Yes, Monty's right, I started last year. I've been there for 6 months. So as a caveat, I might not know all of the history of the different work that has been going on in your communities. If it's good stuff, I will totally take credit for any of it. If it's not so good, then I will tell you I have no idea what you're talking about because I wasn't there until 6 months ago. But in all seriousness, I think many of you all would agree that the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, just like CDC, has been leading this work for a really long time and has been really trying to push our movement of healthy living forward. In fact, the foundation has spent 40 years trying to take on the most major health and healthcare issues of our time. Over the last 2 years, we've really been talking about it in the context of a culture of health. And this means that we are recognizing health is an essential part of everything we do. So I'd like to pause here for a moment and just ask you to turn to a neighbor and share with them 3 words that come to mind when you read this sentence, or this question. What is a culture of health? So share 3 words to your neighbor about what do you think that means? What does that mean to you? So go ahead. All right, so they only gave me an hour on the agenda, so I'm going to ask you to pause. I won't use my old Y camp days where I say, if you hear my voice, clap once. If you hear my voice, clap twice. If you hear my voice, clap 3 times. I get a disadvantage or an advantage because I got the microphone, so of course you can hear my voice. But it works really well in large group settings if you ever need to use that. So I'm going to just ask you to call out. What are some of the words that you heard? So I'm going to pick on Loudon first. What did you hear? The default way of being. How about over here? Access to healthy food. Engaging. Over here? Anyone? Quality of life. Exercise. Equity. Over here? Social norms. Self-determination. Over there, corner? I saw you talking. Hopefully you were doing the assignment. I didn't hear you. Built environment, thank you. How about over there in the front? Religion. Expectations. Respect. Thank you. So, I don't know, y'all, it sounds like we're building a movement here, right? It sounds like what we're talking about is all of these things that are important to us and how we all collectively are going to work together. Let's see if this will work. So, culture filters every aspect of our everyday life. It is what we think and what we feel and what we care about. It is how we learn and how we teach each other. It's how we relate to one another. I love this picture. It's one of my favorites. Now, picture of being healthy as you can be is part of our everyday culture. Just picture it for a second. If it's baked right into the fabric and the very core of American existence, what if claiming, reclaiming, or sustaining health was a priority for everyone, no matter how much you earn, where you live, what you do, or where you come from? That's what we mean by a culture of health. And we are striving to build a national culture of health that will enable all of us to live longer, healthier lives now and for generations to come. That's what it's all about. That's what we're trying to do. Now, we know that this is a big, diverse country made up of people who define health in very different terms. We heard some of that just this morning. Lots of different ideas about what that means, and that's wonderful. That's part of our goal, is that we're trying to identify and utilize language that connects and can be adapted to whatever different perspectives people have. For some, it means running a marathon once a year. It's one of my goals. I've never run a marathon. For others, it may mean being able to ride their bikes to school on safe streets. For all of us, it should mean going to see the doctor who asks us about our lives outside of the clinic, or knowing that our kids are getting nutritious food at school and getting a better chance to be active someplace safe and accessible. Good health gives people the opportunity to be their best, fulfill their potential, and thrive in an environment that supports their goals for themselves and their families. And we know it fuels our economy. We also know that being healthy is something we all value, right? Would we agree to that? See some head nodding. Seeing if I see anyone shaking their head no, because we could talk in the break. Okay. About my favorite vineyards in Loudoun County is what I meant. But health means something different to each of us. We all know one thing for sure: being as healthy as we can be will help us lead to productive, prosperous lives. And that's something we should all try to work to achieve. Caring about health builds neighborhoods and cities with green space, recreational facilities, public transportation, and thoughtful planning. It means reducing violence, and it means making sure our kids can enter school strong and ready to learn. Unfortunately, healthy living is often seen as an accomplishment that only those who are already fit can fully achieve. But we must look beyond healthcare. We must understand how other critical factors really impact and affect our health, such as early childhood environments, education, housing, jobs, and the built environment, how it all impacts and feeds into how we live and how it impacts our health. Our country cannot build a comprehensive culture of health as long as many continue to face the steep and stubborn barriers critical to well-being. That is why the foundation has identified achieving health equity as one of our critical components of everything we do. And I absolutely heard that yesterday from Dr. Jack and Dr. Duckworth as well. If we don't achieve health equity, then we've actually lost in our battle and our efforts to try to achieve health. We have to achieve health equity. Our health and well-being is often unduly and unequally influenced by income, education, ethnicity, and zip code. And those repercussions are felt across the nation. So I'm going to repeat those 4 things because our research at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has showed us unequivocally that is actually, those are the factors that influence our health. So it's income, and you can actually repeat these after me just to make sure they stick. Income, education, ethnicity, and zip code. So those are the magic 4. We need to address those. We need to look at our work upstream and thinking about how we're going to impact and influence those that have such a huge impact on our lives and our health. When young children experience poverty, hunger, family violence, or substance abuse, we know that they're more likely to drop out of school, end up in prison, and become addicted to drugs. We absolutely know this now. We know that these are attributions and connections to how children can succeed in life. So we need to address these issues. When our military, sorry, my slide's not advancing. Here we go. When our military recruiters have to turn away more than 70% of young people because they are too fat, they're uneducated, or tangled up in the legal system in order to serve, we know we're putting our national security at risk. When 1/3 of our kids are overweight or obese, we know that we have a generation of kids that are going to not live as long as their parents. When too many of our children are still overweight and obese, it means they're facing a specter and a lifetime of chronic disease. And research warns us that if we don't do something now, we're going to have kids, like I said, that don't live as long as their parents. As I said earlier, we know that health will always be linked to healthcare. But we're beginning to acknowledge that there's influence by social factors like how safe our neighborhoods are, how strong and supportive our families are, and how invested we are in our communities. But knowing this has still not led to widespread progress. It hasn't led to broad collaboration or equity in health. When a community has no safe places to socialize, no nearby stores offering healthy food options, air that is unfit to breathe, water that is unsafe to drink, people have a harder time making healthier choices. We have to get past those days of telling people they just need to live healthier and they need to just be healthy and they need to take on these issues and these circumstances for themselves. When a business has too many employees struggling with chronic conditions, we know that it will face rising costs that threatens its bottom line. As I mentioned earlier, I know you all know now, and you probably did before you came into this room, that in America, your zip code at birth may be as important as your genetic code in predicting how well and how long you live. It's shocking, right? So I said earlier I wasn't going to show you a map, but I slipped one more in. So this is a map actually of New Orleans. And you could see in New Orleans how life expectancy differs across just even neighborhoods in New Orleans itself. In fact, life expectancy can vary by 25 years across different neighborhoods here in New Orleans. I've got tons of these maps. If you ever want to know, we have a lot of the major cities in the country done. We haven't gotten to a lot of the rural communities in this country, but here's a plug, check out county health rankings and road maps to see your counties. I heard a lot of folks actually referencing where their county's set, but if you haven't looked at that, check that out. But in addition, there's also on the rwjf.org, there's lots of maps of life, they're called life expectancy maps. That's what you search for. We must embrace a more integrated, comprehensive approach to health, one that is strengthened by the perspectives, ideas, and creativity of many. Every one of you in this room, I know, have tackled pieces of this puzzle. And I know you're in this room because you want to tackle additional pieces of this puzzle. And maybe also because you want to try to figure out how to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But if we're really ready to tackle these challenges, we know it'll require individuals, institutions, and industries to think and work differently, both together and on their own. So I ask you this: what if we all agreed to stop defining health in this country as simply not being sick? What if we started working together to get others, especially those of the groups in the room, or those advocates in the room, or those advocates in your communities that are not in this room? What if we started working with those that are the less obvious folks, the non-traditional partners that you might have, and really seeing how they view their health and how they are connected to health? What would it look like if everyone in America realized that health is actually everything? So I'm going to pause for a second to tell you a story. Everyone loves stories. I spent some time in Jackson, Mississippi. I can't remember, was there anyone from Mississippi? Yay! Of course, Chip right there. Jackson, Mississippi, there was a shopping mall built in 1968. Just like many shopping malls across the country, the shopping mall began to stop seeing as many people coming in to shop. The teenagers decided it wasn't the cool place to hang out. The stores started shutting down. The economic decline started happening. This is a story that could have actually happened in many, many communities across the country. But in 1995, a group of folks in Jackson, a lot of unlikely partners, really came together to build the Jackson Medical Mall. They reimagined it as a hub for health. And listen to how I describe what's there, and it goes back to what I'm talking about, this larger understanding of what it is we mean, what it is that I mean when we say being healthy. It has stores in it, but it also has social services in it. It has medical clinics. It has a daycare center. Those are the kids in the daycare center right there. It has classes to get a GED. It has a professional training classes for to training nursing assistants. It has free tax preparation. It has a health insurance enrollment center. And it does have, I think there's a gap. And they're building a movie theater, so you got to talk to the teenagers. But most importantly, it serves 200,000 patients a year in this medical mall. What's also happened is that nearby, things have changed around this medical mall as well. A senior center housing complex, that's in the bottom left, was built and actually has pathways and walkways to the medical mall. And actually a grocery store opened up and 2 new banks all around the mall. One of the creators of the mall this is his quote, he said, "We've created a village here, a community. The community knows that we care and we are in this together." So Jackson, Mississippi is one of our County Health Rankings and Roadmaps award winners. And I want to encourage you all, again, if you're taking notes, please look up the Culture of Health prize winners. We're actually just about to announce our new prize winners this year, but it's never too late to start working on the application for next year. And I bet just being very familiar with some of the tools and resources and documents you have to submit to your colleagues for CDC, you have a lot of this already written down. So think about how you can repackage it and turn this into an application about your vision, strategies, and goals. It's always great when you can use reports for multiple reasons and purposes, right? So check out the Culture of Health prize winners. I'll tell you later where you can find that. So I'm also just going to pause. How am I doing on time, Monty? Am I okay? I'm also going to pause to tell you a little bit how we at the Foundation are looking at schools differently. Just again as an example of how we're trying to do our work differently at the Foundation. So as you earlier remembered, education was number 2 on the list that I made you call out. We know that the influence of education really has a dramatic influence on one's health and their health outcomes. So what does this mean from a strategy development from what we're doing at the Foundation? We also know that more education is connected to a longer, healthier life. So pause for a second, think about that. The longer someone is in school, the longer they're going to live. So shouldn't we be doing everything we can to make sure kids stay in school? We also know that healthier children learn better. We also know that early social competence leads to lifetime success. So as an example, a kindergartner with strong emotional skills is 4 times more likely to graduate from college. So shouldn't we be investing time in the earliest years to make sure kids have the social and emotional skills to get through life? We also know, of course, that there's massive education disparities in this country. Gaps in educational attainment disproportionately affect certain populations of children. So again, how much education a child gets is often dictated by their ethnicity. We know that active kids learn better. Our research has shown us this. So, of course, we should be thinking about strategies about making sure we're not punishing kids by taking away their recess if they misbehave. Or, don't get me started about taking physical education out of school. That was my lobbying days of the past. But there's so much research has showed us that we need to keep kids active in order to be engaged. And we also know that children are overweight, or if they enter preschool overweight or obese, they're 5 times more likely to be obese as they become adults. So again, thinking about end-of-life care, or once individuals are in college, we've missed the mark, we've missed the boat. We really need to be thinking about making sure that all children enter kindergarten at a healthy weight. So now I want to talk a little bit about our Culture of Health Action Framework. In your packet, you got this great executive summary. So I'm pointing this out now so you don't have to squint in my next few slides because it's all in here. So the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation developed an action framework to help our nation really broaden the discussion about health and bring in new voices to get to better health faster. It's called a framework and not a model on purpose. A model is formulaic and fixed and really final. But what we're looking at is something that is adaptable, amendable, and hopefully suitable for lots of communities, organizations, and perspectives. It illustrates how we at the foundation intend to work alongside others in a natural effort to build a culture of health, and how different sectors can mobilize and to measure their progress together. We at the foundation will frame our efforts across the action areas, but we're not even trying to attempt to have funding strategies in each one of the action areas. And we also acknowledge, of course, the foundation itself this isn't how our work plan on how we're moving forward. So we're not sitting around thinking about like, oh, we need a grantee to do this action area. We need someone to work on this measure. That's not what it's about. What it's about is actually trying to figure out how we as a country build a movement to a culture of health. Everyone plays a role in that, whether it's federal agencies, and actually we worked with CDC to develop the framework, other foundations, private sectors, whoever it is, how we all fit together, that's the goal of this framework, is to have a roadmap for our movement of a culture of health. We have prioritized drivers, and the drivers are really the engine of what keeps the framework moving. And so I've highlighted a couple here, and I will go into them a bit more. And again, you can read them in your handout. We've also created national measures. Right now, we have 41 of them. We know full well that those might change. We might have 60 next year. We might have 37 the year after. Who knows? But we're really trying to be fluid and really try to capture the measures that can move our work forward. It's really how we're going to track our progress, again, as a country and as a nation moving forward. And so the framework is something that we're using at the foundation, as I said, as a compass to guide our work. But again, we're hoping that others will utilize it and pick this up and be able to implement it in different ways. So I'm going to dive down into the action areas just for a second so you can help understand what these are all about. And I think, as I was listening to you all yesterday, this is all going to be pretty common sense. I don't think anything I'm going to talk about now, someone in the back is going to say, "What? That's crazy. I have never heard of that." Or like, "What? This makes no sense." I assure you, it might be language, it might be different ways we talk about it, but we've all been talking about this work for the last 20, 25 years in the healthy communities world. Our first action area is around making health a shared value. This really emphasizes the importance of individuals, families, and communities prioritizing and shaping a culture of health. Everyone should feel engaged in their community's process and decisions and believe they have a voice in the process. I heard that yesterday around community engagement and making sure it's authentic, genuine, and true. One of the drivers here is the first one is around mindset and expectations. And it's really asking us how we are prioritizing and promoting health and well-being. Civic engagement is around how we are participating in activities that advance the public good. So maybe it's not to advance our grant or to advance our organizational mission, but it's actually about advancing the public good. It's a sense of community. Do we have social connections that allow us to thrive? I often love, there's a lot of great, interesting articles written about refrigerator rights in this country. Have anyone heard of this concept, refrigerator rights? What this means is that about 20 years ago, most neighborhoods in America, basically neighbors would have refrigerator rights with their neighbors. That means you can walk in, you can open up their fridge, and get something out of it. Hey, John. Hey, Sue. Hey, Amanda, how you doing? Grab hopefully a healthy beverage or a healthy snack. But refrigerator rights have deteriorated in this country. So I bet you're sitting around thinking right now, which one of my neighbors would I be totally fine with them walking in and opening up my fridge? Doesn't sound like too many of y'all. But really, it gets to the heart of social cohesion in this country. It takes a village, it takes a community. These are our kids. If you haven't read Robert Putnam's book recently, Our Kids, it's an amazing dissection of how the social cohesion in our country has unraveled and how that has led to us not knowing our neighbors, caring about our neighbors, and indeed the connections of our own health with how you care about your neighbors. So think about that. So maybe a little summer project, develop some refrigerator rights with your neighbors. It's probably not going to be in a CDC action plan, but just saying. So the next action area is fostering cross-sector collaboration to improve health and well-being. Again, you've heard of this. Are individuals, institutions, and communities doing all they can to prevent illness and promote health? For well-being to flourish, we need to work together. And this action area really looks at collaborations that include sectors, really also including, importantly, those seen outside of public health or outside of health care. Cooperation has to exist across education, business, transportation, community development. Here, this is where I normally say planning, but I don't need to say that to this crowd. And really the central role to how it all fits to the culture of health. The number and quality of partnerships, how many organizations are working together and are really seeing successful outcomes. Investment in cross-collaboration sectors, is there adequate financial to support to enable cross-sector collaborations? So what I mean by that is it in someone's job description to make sure that they're collaborating and that they're working on the collaborations in their community, in your community? Is it baked into part of the mission of your organization, your entities, to really make sure that this is a core component and it's not just an implicit thing that you all do? Are there policies to support collaborations? Are there systems in place to sustain health as a shared goal? I hate to say this, but what happens if you all in this room change jobs? Nobody's going to change jobs ever, right? But if you do, who's going to take the mantle on once you leave? Do you have the systems in place that make sure that your passion is translated to the next person that's going to have your job? Some of you might now be thinking, oh, I need to work on that right now. Hopefully not, because again, hopefully no one's leaving. Third action area is really around creating healthy, more equitable communities. The places where we live, learn, work, pray, and play all contribute to our ability to become and stay healthy. And as I mentioned earlier, we know that zip code has as much of an impact on our health as our genetic code. And we know that while personal choice and responsibility also play a part in well-being, a culture of health depends on businesses, government, individuals, and organizations working together to build healthier, more equitable communities. How effective are your environments in fostering the healthy development of our children or in adapting for older adults so they can age in place? Do your neighborhoods offer access to nutritious and affordable food, recreational facilities, lifelong learning environments, active transportation methods such as bikes or trails? And do your communities feel safe and protected? What are the social and community factors that contribute to wellness? That's really the question around social and economic environment and policy and governance. Do we have policies in place that support us living our healthiest lives? Fourth and finally is our action area around strengthening integration of health services and systems. As I mentioned a few times in this conversation, that we aim to balance medical treatment with public health and social services. This means examining the role of healthcare as part of a larger network and deepening connections with a broader set of partners. It also means that we address the realities of patients' lives that directly influence the health outcomes and costs. One way to think about this is instead of a doctor asking the patient, "What's wrong with you?" the doctor asks, "What matters to you?" So access, is it comprehensive, continuous, and available to all who need it? Consumer experience, how do patients feel about their health care and those outcomes? Balance and integration, are public health, social service, and health care systems really working together? So all of this is to get to our overall outcome of improved health, improved population health, well-being, and equity. If we were to make progress in all 4 action areas, we believe that our nation's health will improve substantially. The outcomes and areas and measures will help us track our long-term improvements while encouraging a broader definition of health. A culture of health is intended to support a trajectory of well-being throughout the lifespan, addressing any health issues as early as possible. The notion of perfect health is not our goal, so much as ensuring that everyone has the capacity and the opportunity to live as healthy life as they can. So our outcome areas here are around enhanced individual and community well-being. Really, to what extent are people able to realize their full potential to health and well-being? Managing their chronic disease, are we supporting a trajectory of well-being throughout their lives and not just focusing on end-of-life care? And reduce healthcare costs. What do healthcare costs, or how do our healthcare costs compare to our outcomes? So are we spending so much money but still not improving our health outcomes, or are we being smarter on what it is that we actually spend our time, our energy, and passions on prevention? So I ask you, what are you measuring? Again, you're not intended to read all these measures. They're in your handout. There are 41 of them. I do not have them committed to memory. I've got like 35 of them pretty solid, but the other ones I kind of forget. But there's 41 of them. And again, I'm asking this because I want you to think about how you're connected to this larger strategy and this larger effort. As was already said before by Dr. Duckworth and Dr. Jack yesterday, there have been more than 600 investments of CDC in place-based change. If you add another 600 from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, you had another however many from Kaiser and Kresge, the list, and Kellogg, the list goes on and on. There are thousands of communities that have been funded to do place-based interventions. How you learn from those past efforts, those past failures, what they've measured, what data they already have to really help to advance our work moving forward. So I also encourage you to check out the website cultureofhealth.org. That's where you can read stories about like Jackson, Mississippi, or you can read lots of other stories. There's lots of cool videos on there as well. And that's also where you can find out information about applying to be a Culture of Health Prize winner. We at the Foundation have issued a challenge to individuals and organizations across America to forge new and unconventional partners with the goal of building a culture of health that benefits all, and all means all. No individual, organization, or sector can alter the course of health single-handedly. We know that. We know that only 20% of our health outcomes depend on the healthcare sector. We know that health is, of course, inextricably tied to where we live, learn, work, pray, and play. It is shaped by the stability and safety of our housing, the quality of our schools, the availability of clean and open spaces in our communities. And this is why now, more than ever, we at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation are convinced that this is a movement that must be championed not solely by those in the health or even in the public health sector, but by others as well. Think about how you're connecting in your communities with criminal justice, real estate development, financing, technology, who can make an app for what you're trying to do, and organizations, again, that you've been partnering with for decades. How can you really think of your partnership and your collaboration in a different way and really trying to turn it 180 degrees to figure out what are the new directions and impact you can have. So again, I encourage you to go to our Culture of Health website to find out more. So why? Here's the answer to the question. For those of you who don't know, a Hokie is the mascot of Virginia Tech. That's where I went to school. These are my kids. I do want them to grow up to be Hokies. Got to admit, totally do. They have so much Hokie gear, they wear red or maroon and orange all the time. But more importantly, I want them to grow up in a society where they thrive, in a community where they can achieve, and surrounded by a culture of health. That's why I'm doing the work that I'm doing, and I bet all of you want the same thing for the children in your life. I'm betting. So here's my information. Please feel free to email me. Follow me on Twitter. I promise I do not tweet about my obsession with House of Cards. I totally am obsessed with that show. I don't tweet about that. The only things I really tweet about are around funding opportunities, really cool reports that organizations have put forward, conferences, all connected to Healthy Communities work and the movement. So please follow me on Twitter, Monica H. Vinluan. Don't follow Monica Vinluan. She's not the same person. So it's Monica H. Vinluan. She does tweet about weird things, the other person. So I don't want anyone to be going there, but or you can if you want to, whatever. So please join me in really building a movement and building, what this generation and what this country can look like for our children. As an old adage often goes, we didn't inherit the earth from our ancestors, whether we're borrowing it from our children. Thank you. I'm going to advance next slide.
Thanks, Monica. And we will join you. But I'm a little bit intrigued about Monica Vinluan. She may be getting a lot of people figuring out what she's tweeting about versus Monica House Vinluan. So
Monica H. Vinluan, not House.
Monica H. Vinluan, thank you. So we wanted to give you a minute just pivoting off kind of this last couple points that Monica was talking about, and we were just talking about even yesterday together, that to be in a movement, somebody used the term cause, to do this type of work, we need to really be anchored in our sense of why. And sometimes we're still figuring that out, but wanted to give you a moment around, what's your why for doing this work? What kind of personally inspires you? What causes you to show up at the table? And to share that with your team, not as a table, but just as a team. And if you're not with your team, maybe with just one other person. And then the other side of the coin is, what do you hope this opportunity, this particular grant, is going to be able to do for your community? I'm not asking what strategies you're working on. What's your hope for what this sets your community up to do? And obviously, hopefully, you can take in some of the ideas that Monica shared with us. So going to give you about 7 minutes, again, in your teams or with somebody that you're sitting next to just kind of share your thoughts on those two questions. All right. So make this your last comment, if you would, please, and want to grab people's attention here at the center. So last comment in your small groups, please. As if you can hear me in the back corner, I'll avoid the clap thing at first, but thank you, Monica, for reminding us of the camp strategy. As David had said yesterday, I think being part of this movement, we're a slice of this movement. This isn't a beauty contest. It's not a competition. It's, in fact, trying to figure out how we can help each other, get better together. And so in that spirit, I know you just had a few minutes, but have a couple of mic runners and wonder if you all wouldn't mind helping to populate the room with what are some of the ideas around either why you feel like you're doing what you're doing, and particularly what this opportunity represents for your community, kind of what's brought you here. So we'll be brave enough to kind of get us going on that. Right here? Okay, we'll come right back to you.
Okay.
She has a mic.
So I'm Jane Moore from Tacoma, Washington, and why I'm in this work is because after practicing family medicine as a physician for 30 years, I want to make it easier for people to adopt habits that keep them healthy instead of having to take care of people with chronic diseases that are easily prevented by lifestyle changes.
Thank you, Jean.
Hi, I'm Tracy Walden. I am from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the why for my work is I believe access to healthy food is a civil right, so to make sure that people are able to utilize their civil right.
Love it. Thank you. What else? How about over here on this side? What are some of the whys for what we're doing? Right over here. And again, if you could share your name, that would be terrific.
I'm Dan Robinson, and our group is in central Wisconsin, and we work with the communities, different communities that are there, including 3 Native American tribes that are in that area. And so some of the things that we shared at our table talked about the potential for making a positive impact on the health of the individuals in our communities is what inspires the work, but also helping people understand the impact that food has when it goes into their body and how that impacts their health, because lots of us, including myself, don't fully understand that.
Yep.
And just this idea of the spiritual and a sort of personal understanding that we're all in this together and trying to build that sense of community that was referred to by the speaker earlier. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and people are increasingly, I think, using this. I know the YMCA, healthy mind, body, and spirit, and we're actually looking at a measure that includes RWJ2, that is looking at the sense of spirit and purpose in our work, how critical that is for both resilience and to keep us going. Thank you for sharing that. Please.
My name is Dennis Cosby from Michigan, and when I look at the number 2 on there, how do you hope this opportunity will impact your community? The community that we're from is, we only have 2 grocery stores in the whole county. And you talk about a food desert, it's huge. So the way that I'm looking at this question is, how would we impact that community, or how do we hope this opportunity will? It's simply, we know that there's so many people that live in our area that may not even realize that they're disadvantaged, health-wise. Mm-hmm. So we kind of look at it as almost an educational opportunity. We're going to have to take the coalition and help the coalition to realize that they're living in this condition as well. So it's going to be a huge effort for us to help to educate them as to where they are before we can really impact them. But the impact is the end game. So we feel pretty good about the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. I love that. Part of this is this awareness raising. I don't think if we know where we are, it's hard to figure out where we're going. And yours is clearly, some of your work is likely to be around food access. What else? Do we have anybody else over here on this side? Please.
I work out of West Virginia, and we're in the process right now of trying to get off of the nation's top list of obesity. But the how is, how do you do that, but also respecting the cultural nature of the Appalachian people? How do you get them to realize that you don't need to go to a covered dish and have 15 dishes made with mayonnaise, but still respect what they believe and who they believe they are as a people?
Yeah. So that's the creative question for you and your team, is how to continue to honor this rich tradition and culture and tip it in a healthy direction? Yeah. What else? Let's a couple more, thanks. Right behind you.
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Gray. I'm from Kent County, Delaware. One of the reasons why, what personally inspires me in this project is, I think lack of health is a symptom of fear, and that we have lost the ability to connect. And one of the things I would like to get out of the project that we're working with in Kent County is to reestablish connections. I'm a planner in Kent County, and one of the things we try to do with planning is to, was told to stand up. One of the things we try to do in planning is establish connections through infrastructure, through bike paths and sidewalks, and sometimes that's an uphill battle. And the other thing what we want to try to do with this project is reestablish connections with the community. We are largely a rural county, and we have suburbanized like a lot of rural counties, and we have little silos of communities. And I often hear from people that they will call the county when they have a problem with their neighbor. They call me. I'm like, well, why don't you talk to your neighbor about your problem? Get out, go to your neighbor. And it's like, well, their grass is too tall. Like, well, why don't you talk to them and find out their problem? And they call us, the county, to cut their grass.
Yeah.
So of course we only hear when there are problems. We don't hear when everyone has their, when things are fine. So we need to get back to how we lived. You talked about the refrigerator rates.
Yeah.
And how we lived in the past, only the good parts. When kids went out and played, you have your kids go out for 3 hours. Your mom didn't know where the heck you were for 3 hours. You came back for dinner. And everyone knew you in the neighborhood. And your neighbors felt very free to discipline you and call your mom when you were in trouble. And we don't live like that anymore. And why don't we? And all the kids, you move for 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, all summer. Kids, your mom didn't know where you were for all day. And you came back. You came back for lunch, and then you came back for dinner. Why don't we live like that anymore?
Yeah.
Because we're afraid. And we're not only afraid, but also sometimes we can't live like that because we don't live in communities where your kids can go out and play like that. So I think we need to start building communities or change our communities or retrofit our communities where we can go back and live like that.
I think I heard you just describe a culture. Not everything in the past you said is perfect. We know that. But a culture where we got each other's back, where we actually are behaving as community members that are contributing to one another's well-being. How about just one more quickie over here?
Sure, Michelle Nance from Charlotte, North Carolina. And as a planner, to me, building for healthy communities provides purpose to planning. And my thought is if we get the built environment right for healthy living and healthy active lifestyles, everything else falls into place. Placemaking, economic development opportunities, walkability, building to allow for future transit and access. It just feels like it all comes into place. So to me, that's the guiding light.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I was just, thinking what Monica was describing in terms of culture and all the different things that touch our lives around health. We're talking about really distributing leadership. And in many ways, I think, we're talking about all of you are kind of being set up, and you already are in many ways leaders to start figuring out how to connect some of these dots. Your job is to help people to see the connections, to gain a better sense of awareness around where there are possibilities and opportunities. And I think, in some ways, for some, it's really easy to get right into the tactics and strategies around how to build a food system and procurement policies, and all those things are super important. But I've been along with Monica on a lot of these place-based coalitions, and I think one of the distinguishing characteristics of those that are getting results that snowball over time are the ones that have leaders that are very clear on their whys. It becomes contagious these days, and are very clear on why they're doing what they're doing, and people have a sense that this is something that's bigger than themselves. People want to join that these days. They want to be a part of something that's healing and productive, and that's a lot of what your role is. Monica, your kids were so small. I remember when you first did those slides, but I just so appreciate you, again, being here with us today to kind of help kick us off, and I think we have a lot of good sessions right in front of us. So one more time, join me in thanking Monica Vinluan for being with us. We're going to take 15 minutes, so be back here no later than 10:15.